I watched a man walk in front of our truck for almost an hour. But the terrifying part wasn't that he was walking alone on a deserted Arizona highway. The terrifying part was this. We were driving at 60 miles per hour, and he never moved. Not closer, not farther away, just walking. The driver had been on that road for over 20 years, and when I pointed at the man ahead of us, he didn't slow down. He didn't even look. He simply said, "Don't point at him." My blood ran cold, because I never told him I was pointing at anyone. Then he whispered, "Whatever you do, don't let him know you can see him." That was the moment I realized. The thing walking on that road wasn't trying to get somewhere. It was waiting for someone to notice it. And unfortunately, that someone was me. The journey had started like any other late-night delivery run through northern Arizona. A quiet road, an old cargo truck, a driver who knew every mile of the desert highway. Nothing about that night seemed unusual when I climbed into Kareem's truck. He was a quiet man, probably in his 50s, with the tired face of someone who had spent more years on the road than at home. He checked the mirrors, started the engine, and said, "Keep your phone charged. We lose signal out there." I looked through the windshield at the empty highway stretching into the desert. "That bad?" Kareem kept his eyes ahead. "No." A short pause. "Just far away from everything." At the time, I thought he was talking about the location. I didn't know he meant something else. As the truck left the last town behind, the world slowly disappeared. No streetlights, no buildings, no other vehicles. Just endless desert on both sides and a narrow road cutting through the darkness. For a while, the silence felt peaceful. Then it started feeling wrong. I noticed Kareem checking the mirrors more often. Not like a driver checking traffic, like someone making sure something wasn't following us. I wanted to ask him about it, but before I could, something appeared ahead in the headlights. At first, I thought it was a road sign. Then, it moved. A person, walking slowly down the middle of the highway. Alone. In the middle of nowhere. And the moment I saw him, I had no idea that the next hour of that journey would change the way I looked at empty roads forever. The moment I saw him, I thought we would pass him within seconds. That was the normal thing that should have happened. A man walking on a highway. A truck approaching from behind. The distance should disappear, but it didn't. The figure kept walking at the same slow pace. The truck moved closer. The headlights grew brighter. Yet somehow, he remained exactly where he was. I leaned forward in my seat, trying to understand what I was seeing. "Someone's walking in the middle of the road," I said. Kareem didn't answer. I looked at him. "Shouldn't we stop?" His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "No." The answer came too quickly. Not like a driver refusing to stop for a stranger. Like someone who already knew stopping was a bad idea. I looked back through the windshield. The man was still there. His back was toward us. I couldn't see his face. He wore dark clothes that blended into the night, and his walking pace never changed. Not once. A strange feeling started building inside me. Because the closer we drove, the less sense it made. I checked the speedometer, almost 60 miles per hour. I looked back at the road. The man was still the same distance away. I laughed quietly. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the darkness was confusing my eyes. Maybe there was some simple explanation. There had to be. I turned to Kareem. "You don't see him?" For a moment, everything inside the truck went silent. Even the engine seemed quieter. Kareem didn't look at me. "What?" I pointed toward the road. "The person ahead of us." His face changed, only slightly. But I noticed. His expression became serious. I said. His voice lowered. Don't point. I slowly lowered my hand. The way he reacted bothered me more than the person on the road, because he wasn't surprised that I saw something. He was afraid that I had drawn attention. Onto it. Kareem, I swallowed. What is wrong with that man? For several seconds he said nothing. Then he asked, How long have you been watching him? I frowned. What? How long? His voice was different now. No longer calm. I looked back at the road. The figure continued walking. I don't know. Maybe 5 minutes. Kareem shook his head. No. A cold feeling moved through me. What do you mean, no? He finally looked at me, and the expression on his face was something I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. You should have looked away the moment you noticed him. I stared at him. Why? Kareem turned back toward the road. Because the figure ahead of us had suddenly stopped walking. The figure ahead of us had suddenly stopped walking. For the first time since I saw him, he wasn't moving. He was just standing there in the middle of the highway. My eyes stayed locked on him. Why did he stop? I whispered. Kareem didn't answer. His grip on the steering wheel became tighter. The truck continued moving forward, but slower now. Much slower. Kareem. My voice came out quieter than I expected. What is happening? He kept staring at the road. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Don't look at him for too long. I turned toward him. What? Just do what I say. There was no anger in his voice. No attempt to scare me. Only fear. I looked back at the windshield. The figure was still standing there, waiting. And that was when I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. The man wasn't standing in the middle of the road anymore. He had moved slightly to the side, almost as if he was making space for us to pass. But the strange thing was, he wasn't facing away from us anymore. He was turned slightly toward the truck. I couldn't see his face clearly. The headlights only reached part of his body, but I had the uncomfortable feeling that he was looking directly at me. I quickly looked away. How do you know about this? I asked. Kareem stayed silent. Kareem. Nothing. I looked at him. Have you seen him before? For several seconds, the only sound inside the truck was the engine. Then he finally spoke. Not exactly. That answer made no sense. What does that mean? He took a slow breath. It means I have seen what happens after people see him. The desert outside felt even darker after those words. I wanted to laugh. I wanted him to tell me this was some kind of joke. But Kareem wasn't joking. He kept driving, straight toward the figure. Why don't we turn around? I asked. Kareem Essie, hook his head. We can't. Why not? His eyes stayed fixed ahead. Because you already noticed him. I felt a chill move through me. What does that have to do with anything? Kareem didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward and turned off the radio. The radio had been silent for the last 20 minutes. But he still turned it off, like he didn't want anything else making noise. Then, from somewhere outside the truck, came a sound. A slow tapping. 3 knocks. Against the side of the cargo container behind us. I froze. Kareem's face went pale. Because whatever was outside was no longer standing on the road ahead. Because whatever was outside was no longer standing on the road ahead. The 3 knocks echoed through the truck. Slow, clear, deliberate. I turned toward the sound. The cargo container behind us was completely covered in darkness. There was nothing there. At least, nothing I could see. Kareem. My voice barely came out. What was that? He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the road. Don't turn around. The way he said it made me stop moving. Not because I trusted him, because I could hear the fear in his voice. I slowly faced forward again. The figure was still ahead of us. Still walking, still keeping the same distance. But now something was different. The man was no longer in the center of the highway. He was walking along the side of the road, the same direction as us, the same speed as us, like he was traveling beside the truck. My breathing became heavier. How is he doing that? Kareem didn't respond. I looked at him. You know what this is, don't you? For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. 20 years ago, I asked the same question. I stared at him. What? He kept driving. About this road. The truck moved through the darkness. The desert outside looked endless. What happened 20 years ago? Kareem's eyes remained fixed ahead. There was another driver. The way he said it made me uncomfortable. Not a man, not someone. A driver. He was taking the same route, Kareem continued. Same highway, same time of night. I waited. What happened to him? Kareem didn't answer immediately. The silence itself felt like an answer. Finally, he said, he stopped. A cold feeling moved through me. Stopped for who? Kareem looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something worse than fear in his eyes. Regret. He stopped because he thought he saw someone walking alone. The truck continued forward. The figure outside remained beside us. And? Kareem looked back at the road. He opened the door. I felt my hands tighten. What happened after that? Kareem didn't answer. Instead, he reached over and locked the passenger door. Then he locked his own. The small clicking sound felt much louder than it should have. Kareem, he interrupted me. Listen carefully. His voice was low. If you hear your name. I looked at him. Don't answer. Before I could ask why, something moved outside my window. A shadow, walking beside the truck, matching our speed perfectly. And then, a voice came from the darkness outside. My voice. Calling my name. A voice came from the darkness outside. My voice. Calling my name. For a few seconds, my brain refused to accept what I was hearing. It sounded exactly like me. Same tone. Same way I would say it. But I knew I wasn't the one speaking. Kareem, I whispered. He raised one finger. A warning. Don't talk. Don't answer. Don't react. The voice came again. Closer this time. Hey. A pause. Open the door. My entire body went cold. Because the voice wasn't coming from far away anymore. It sounded like someone was walking right beside the truck. I looked at Kareem. His face was completely focused on the road, like he was trying to pretend nothing was happening. How does it know my voice? I asked quietly. Kareem didn't respond. How? Finally, he spoke. It doesn't know your voice. He swallowed. It knows what will make you listen. The truck continued through the empty Arizona highway. The figure ahead was still walking. The voice outside was still following us. And somehow, those two things felt connected. I remembered what Kareem said. You already noticed him. What does that mean? I asked. This time he answered. It means he knows you're there. I stared at him. Who is he? Kareem stayed silent for several seconds. Then he said, We don't know what he is. The answer was worse than anything I expected. You've seen him before? Kareem nodded slightly. Many times. I looked at him. And you still drive this road? A bitter smile crossed his face. Sometimes you don't choose the road. I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. But I would. The voice outside disappeared. The silence that followed felt even heavier. I looked through the windshield. The figure ahead was gone. For the first time in almost an hour. The road was empty. I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been following us was gone. Then Kareem suddenly slammed his hand against the steering wheel. No. I looked at him. What? His eyes were fixed on the road ahead. The road? I looked forward. The highway stretched into the darkness. Nothing unusual, nothing there. What about it? Kareem's voice dropped to a whisper. We should have passed this turn 10 minutes ago. I looked around, confused. What turn? He pointed ahead. A broken road sign appeared in the headlights, and written on it were words that made my stomach sink. The name of the highway we had already passed.
Before we begin, there is something you should know. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The characters, the truck driver, and the events on this highway were created for entertainment. However, the setting behind this story is inspired by a real place. Northern Arizona is known for its vast desert highways, remote landscapes, and long stretches of road where travelers can drive for miles without seeing another person. Over the years, this region has been connected with countless local legends, strange encounters, and unexplained stories passed down by travelers and residents. Some areas of Arizona have even developed reputations for mysterious events and haunted folklore. But the story you're about to hear is not a documented case. It is a fictional horror tale inspired by the isolation, darkness, and mystery of the Arizona desert. So turn down the lights, keep the volume up, and imagine yourself alone on a road where the nearest person may be miles away.
The name of the highway we had already passed. I stared at the sign through the windshield. For a moment, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The letters were faded, but they were clear enough. It was the same highway marker we had passed almost 20 minutes earlier. The same broken sign, the same rusted metal frame, the same crack running across the bottom. My eyes moved from the sign to Kareem. That's impossible. He didn't answer, because he knew it was impossible. The truck kept moving forward, but neither of us spoke. The desert outside looked exactly the same. The same empty land. The same darkness. The same road stretching ahead. But something had changed. We weren't getting anywhere. I checked my phone. No signal. The time on the screen was frozen. 3:47 p.m. I waited a few seconds. Nothing changed. I pressed the power button. The screen went black, then turned back on. Still 11:47. Kareem? My voice sounded weak. Are we lost? He shook his head. No. Then what is happening? He didn't answer. And somehow, his silence scared me more than the figure on the road. Because a lost driver would look confused. Kareem looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment. After a long pause, he finally spoke. There are roads that don't appear on maps. I looked at him. What does that mean? It means sometimes. He stopped, like he was choosing his words carefully. Sometimes a road takes you somewhere before it lets you leave. I wanted to tell him that made no sense. But then I looked outside, and I saw him again. The man, standing ahead, waiting. Except this time, he wasn't walking. He was standing beside the road, facing the truck, facing me. My heart started beating faster. Kareem. He already knew. I could tell from his expression. Don't look directly at him. I forced myself to look away. Why? Kareem lowered his voice. Because every person who has seen him notices the same thing. What? He kept his eyes on the road. They always think he is trying to catch the truck. A pause. But he's not. The truck moved closer. The figure remained still. Then Kareem said the words I didn't want to hear. He's waiting for the passenger. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. What passenger? Kareem slowly turned his head toward me, and before he could answer, something knocked on my window. 3 slow knocks, just like before. Except this time, it wasn't coming from outside the truck. It was coming from inside. The 3 slow knocks were coming from inside. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My mind searched for a logical explanation. Maybe something had fallen. Maybe the old truck was making some strange sound. Maybe fear was making me imagine things. But then, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time from the empty space behind my seat. I slowly turned my head toward Kareem. He was staring straight ahead, but his face had changed. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He looked like he had just heard something he was hoping would never happen. Kareem. My voice shook. There's something inside the truck. He didn't answer. Kareem, what is happening? His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Then he whispered, It chose you. A cold feeling moved through me. What does that mean? Kareem finally looked at me. How long have you been seeing him? I didn't understand. What? The man on the road. I hesitated. Since before we reached the desert. Kareem looked away. That's too long. The way he said it made my stomach sink. What happens if someone sees him? For a moment, the only sound was the engine. Then Kareem spoke. The first time you notice him. He took a breath. The second time, he notices you. I looked toward the passenger window. My reflection stared back at me. But behind my reflection, for a split second, I thought I saw another shape sitting in the darkness behind me. I turned around quickly. Nothing. Only the empty space behind the seats. I looked back at Kareem. What happened to the other driver? He stayed silent. Kareem. Finally, he answered. He disappeared. My throat tightened. Disappeared? His truck was found 3 days later. Where? Kareem looked at the road ahead. Parked on this same highway. A silence filled the cabin. What about him? Kareem didn't answer. He didn't need to. I already knew. The figure outside. The one walking endlessly through the desert. The one nobody else could see. I looked ahead again. The man was gone. But now, something was standing beside our truck, keeping pace. The desert wind moved across the highway. The truck kept driving. And then, from the darkness beside my window, I heard a voice whisper. Not my name this time. Something much worse. It said, You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have looked. The voice disappeared as quickly as it came. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. The truck kept moving through the Arizona desert, but it no longer felt like we were traveling forward. It felt like we were trapped, like the road itself was holding us there. I looked at Kareem. How do we get rid of it? He didn't answer. Kareem. This time he sighed. Not because he was annoyed, because he was tired, like he had been carrying this fear for years. You don't get rid of it. The words hit harder than I expected. Then what do you do? His eyes stayed on the road. You survive until the road ends. I looked through the windshield. The highway stretched endlessly into the darkness. The road always ends, right? Kareem didn't respond. That silence told me more than his words could have. I felt my chest tighten. What happened to the other drivers? Kareem kept driving. Most people don't see him. Why? Because he doesn't show himself to everyone. A pause. But once he does, he stopped. Once he does what? Kareem looked at me. He wants to know if you'll look away. A strange anger replaced some of my fear. This makes no sense. Why me? Kareem looked toward the road ahead. Because you were curious. I stared at him. That's it? You saw something you didn't understand and you kept watching. His voice became quieter. That's how it starts. I remembered the first moment I saw the figure, the way I leaned forward, the way I tried to see him clearly. I had thought I was just being curious. Now I wondered if I had done something else, something I couldn't undo. Suddenly the truck headlights flickered, once, twice. Then everything went dark. For 3 seconds we were completely blind. The engine continued running. The truck continued moving, but there was no light, no road, no desert, nothing. Then the headlights came back, and my blood froze. The figure was standing directly in front of the truck, not far away, not hundreds of feet ahead. Right there. Close enough that I could see the outline of his face. But before I could see it clearly, Kareem slammed the brakes. The truck stopped. The desert became silent. And then Kareem whispered something that made me realize we were no longer trying to escape him. We had reached him. We had reached him. For the first time that night, the distance was gone. The man stood in front of the truck, only a few feet away from the headlights. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. After everything that had happened, after almost an hour of watching him from a distance, now he was finally close. Too close. Kareem kept both hands on the steering wheel. His eyes were fixed straight ahead. Don't open the door. His voice was barely a whisper. I looked at him. Why would I open the door? Kareem didn't answer. Because we both heard it. A soft knock. Against the passenger window. My entire body froze. Slowly, I turned my head. The man was no longer standing in front of the truck. He was beside me, looking through the glass. The headlights didn't reveal his face, only darkness, a shape, a person who shouldn't have been there. I moved away from the window. Kareem, he closed his eyes for a second, like he was accepting something. It's time. My heart dropped. Time for what? He looked at me. For you to understand why I warned you. The truck remained silent. The figure outside didn't move. Then Kareem reached into the compartment beside his seat and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to me. My hands shook as I looked down. It was a picture of a truck on the same highway, the desert behind it, the same road, the same darkness. There were 2 men standing beside the truck. One of them was younger Kareem. The other man was the figure standing outside our truck. I looked at Kareem. My voice barely worked. Who is this? Kareem looked at the photograph. That was my brother. The silence inside the truck became unbearable. He was the first person I saw him with. I stared at the picture. But he's alive? Kareem didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. The truth was already forming in me. I mined. The person outside wasn't someone walking this road. He was someone who belonged to it. Someone who had been waiting there for years. I looked back at the window. The figure was still standing there. Then, slowly, He raised one hand and pointed behind me. I felt every hair on my body stand up. Because he wasn't pointing at Kareem. He wasn't pointing at the road. He was pointing at the empty seat behind me. Kareem whispered, "Don't turn around. Don't turn around." Kareem's words were quiet, but there was something in his voice that made me obey. I kept staring at the windshield. I kept my eyes away from the passenger window, but my mind was already imagining what was behind me. The empty seat, the darkness, the thing that had been inside the truck, the thing that had knocked from behind me. "Who is in this truck?" I whispered. Kareem didn't answer immediately. Outside, the figure remained still, waiting. Finally, Kareem spoke. "The person you saw walking on the road." His voice cracked slightly. "That wasn't him following us." I swallowed. "Then what was it?" Kareem looked at me. "It was him warning us." A cold silence filled the truck. I stared at him. "Warning us from what?" Kareem looked toward the empty seat behind me. "The thing that gets in when someone notices him." My breathing stopped. Everything suddenly made sense. The footsteps, the knocks, the voice. It wasn't the figure outside trying to get inside. Something else had already gotten in. Something I never saw, something I never noticed. Kareem slowly reached forward and turned on the cabin light. For a moment, nothing happened. The seat behind me was empty. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I saw it. A handprint. On the inside of the window behind my seat. A dusty handprint, like someone had been sitting there for a very long time. I looked at Kareem. "What do we do?" He started the engine again. "We drive." "Where?" His eyes moved toward the road ahead. "Until sunrise." The truck began moving. Slowly at first, then faster. The figure outside disappeared into the darkness behind us. For the first time all night, the road started changing. The endless desert began to fade. A faint glow appeared on the horizon. The first signs of morning. The moment we crossed the boundary back toward civilization, the strange feeling inside the truck disappeared. The knocks stopped. The voices stopped. The pressure in the air lifted. But Kareem didn't look relieved. He just kept driving. When we finally reached the delivery location, I climbed out of the truck. Before closing the door, I looked back at him. "Kareem." He looked at me. "Will I ever see him again?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then he looked past me, at the empty road behind my shoulder, and said, "You already did." I turned around. There was nobody there. Just the highway, just the morning light. I looked back at Kareem, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the passenger seat, the same seat where I had been sitting all night. And then I noticed something. On the dusty window, a fresh handprint appeared from the inside. 3 slow knocks followed, and this time, they weren't coming from the road. They were coming from my car.